William dragged himself through the front door, exhausted, ready to collapse, then froze when he heard giggles coming from upstairs, a sound that hadn't existed in his house for 9 months. William Ross's wife, Catherine, died from a sudden heart attack. One moment she was there, the next she was gone. No chance to say goodbye, no time to prepare. But the real horror started after the funeral. His twin daughters, Elizabeth and Emily, just 6 years old, stopped speaking, stopped eating, stopped acknowledging the world existed. They'd just sit together on the floor, holding each other tight, staring at nothing with hollow, empty eyes, like someone had reached inside them and switched off the light. William tried everything, the best doctors money could buy, specialists who flew in from across the country, brain scans, trauma therapy, experimental treatments costing $50,000 a week. 9 months of fighting, 9 months of praying. Nothing changed. Every doctor said the same crushing words. Mr. Ross, the damage may be permanent. They may never speak again. William felt like he was watching his daughters slip away, inch by inch, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Then a woman named Rosemary came to work as a housekeeper. Young, quiet, carried herself like she was used to being invisible. Nobody knew she used to be a nurse. Nobody knew her career had been destroyed by someone else's lie. But when Rosemary looked at those 2 silent little girls, she recognized something the doctors had missed. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, William came home from the office. The house was always quiet, always empty, always suffocating. But this time, he heard something. Laughter, children's voices, coming from upstairs. William stopped dead in the hallway, his briefcase slipping from his hand. What's happening? Who's in my house? His heart pounded as he climbed the stairs, following the sound. Fear and confusion twisting in his chest. This can't be real. This can't be happening. He reached the bedroom door, his hand trembling on the handle. He pushed it open. Elizabeth and Emily were on the floor with Rosemary, dressed in little toy doctor coats, plastic stethoscopes around their necks. They were checking Rosemary's pulse, giggling, talking to her. Talking. William's legs nearly buckled beneath him. He grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing, tears pouring down his face, his voice breaking. How? How is this even possible? What did you do? Before we dive in, do me a favor, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because sometimes when you've lost all hope, God quietly sends someone to show you that miracles still happen. And maybe, just maybe, you need to hear this story today. William's plane touched down in Boston just past midnight. He'd been in London for 3 days closing an acquisition deal, the kind of deal that would normally have him buzzing with energy, running numbers in his head, already planning the next move. But all he could think about was getting home to Catherine and the girls. His phone rang as he walked through the terminal. Massachusetts General Hospital lit up on the screen. His stomach dropped. Why would the hospital be calling this late? He answered. Hello? The voice on the other end was shaking. A nurse, barely holding it together. Mr. Ross, I'm so sorry. Your wife. She collapsed at home. Cardiac arrest. The paramedics did everything they could, but the rest of her words dissolved into static. William stopped walking. People rushed past him on both sides, pulling suitcases, talking on phones, living normal lives. His wasn't normal anymore. Catherine was gone. No warning, no symptoms, just gone. He stood there in the middle of Logan Airport, gripping his phone, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and whispered the only words he could manage. This can't be real. But it was. The drive home was a blur. He doesn't remember calling a car. Doesn't remember giving the driver his address. Just the cold leather seat beneath him and the thought looping in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. How do I tell Elizabeth and Emily their mother isn't coming home? When he pulled up to the brownstone, the house was dark except for one light in the living room. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels wrong, heavy, suffocating. Elizabeth? Emily? His voice echoed through the hallway. No answer. He dropped his bag and moved deeper into the house, his heart pounding harder with every step. Sweethearts. Daddy's home. Nothing. He found them in the living room, sitting on the floor near the couch. They were holding each other, Elizabeth's arms wrapped around Emily, Emily's head resting on Elizabeth's shoulder. Their eyes were open, but they weren't looking at anything, just staring. Blank. Empty. William's chest tightened. He dropped to his knees in front of them. "Baby girls, it's Daddy. I'm here." He reached out, gently touching their faces. Warm skin, soft cheeks, but no reaction. They didn't blink, didn't move, didn't cry. It was like looking at two little statues. "Elizabeth, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Nothing. "Emily, please, look at Daddy." Still nothing. His hands started shaking, panic rising in his throat. "What's wrong with them? What happened?" He pulled them close, wrapping his arms around both of them, feeling their small bodies against his chest. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Daddy's here. I'm not going anywhere." But wherever his daughters had gone, he couldn't reach them. That night, William didn't sleep. He sat beside their bed, watching them breathe. Two tiny figures curled together under the blanket, holding onto each other like it was the only thing keeping them alive. And somewhere deep in his gut, he knew. This wasn't just grief. This was something far worse. His daughters were slipping away, and he had no idea how to bring them back. The days after Catherine's funeral blurred together. William barely left the house. He'd cancel meetings, ignore calls from the office, just sit in the living room watching Elizabeth and Emily. They didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't react when he said their names or tried to hold them. They'd just sit together on the floor, hour after hour, staring at nothing, like they'd built a wall between themselves and the rest of the world, and he couldn't find a way through. William started making calls, first to Boston Children's Hospital, then specialists in New York, Philadelphia. He described what was happening, and every single person said the same thing. "You need Dr. Marcus Pemberton." Marcus was chief of pediatric psychiatry at Mass General, one of the most respected doctors in the country. He'd known the Ross family for over a decade, attended fundraisers at their home, played golf with William on weekends. If anyone could help, it would be him. Marcus arrived on a grey Tuesday morning. He walked into the brownstone carrying a leather briefcase, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. William met him at the door, exhausted, desperate. "Marcus, thank God you're here." Marcus didn't smile, didn't offer empty reassurances. He just nodded. "Let me see them." He spent the entire day observing the girls, watching how they moved, how they breathed, taking notes on a small pad he pulled from his jacket pocket. He didn't speak to them, didn't try to engage, just watched. The next morning, Marcus brought in his team: brain scans, neural activity monitors, reflex tests, psychological evaluations, equipment. William didn't recognize being wheeled in and out of the house. Elizabeth and Emily sat through it all like ghosts, silent, unresponsive, holding each other's hands. William stayed close the entire time, his chest tight with hope he didn't dare name. Please let there be something, some answer, some way to bring them back. On the third day, Marcus called him into the study. William sat down across from him, hands gripping the armrests. Marcus removed his glasses, set them on the desk, and exhaled slowly. "William, I'm very sorry." Those 4 words made William's stomach drop. "Your daughters aren't suffering from ordinary grief," Marcus continued, his voice steady, clinical. "They've entered a state called traumatic catatonic withdrawal. Their minds have essentially shut down to protect themselves from the shock of losing Catherine." William's throat tightened. "But they can recover, right? There's treatment." Marcus paused, and in that pause, William felt something inside him begin to crack. In cases this severe, especially in children this young, the prognosis is not good. Marcus's eyes held no warmth. "We're looking at years of intensive therapy, possibly permanent psychological damage. William, they may never be the same." The words hit like a fist to the chest. "No," William's voice broke. "No, Marcus, there has to be something. Anything. Please." Marcus opened his briefcase. "There are experimental treatments, neural stimulation therapies, intensive programs." He pulled out a folder. "They're expensive, very expensive. But they may offer some improvement." William didn't hesitate. "I don't care what it costs." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll arrange everything." And just like that, the trap was set. The treatment started the following week. Marcus's team arrived with equipment that turned the brownstone into something that didn't feel like home anymore. Medical monitors in the living room, therapy chairs in the den, nurses rotating shifts around the clock. Elizabeth and Emily were put on a schedule: morning evaluations, afternoon sessions, evening neural stimulation treatments that required them to wear small electrodes on their temples. $50,000 a week. William paid without blinking. The first month, he told himself it just needed time. The second month, he watched for any sign of progress, a blink, a movement, anything. By the third month, he started lying to himself that small things were improvements when they weren't. The girls remained the same, silent, holding each other, eyes vacant. William tried to keep working, but his focus shattered. He'd sit in board meetings staring at presentations he couldn't process, his mind always somewhere else. Are they eating today? Did they respond to the therapist? Please God, let there be something. Every evening, he'd come home and ask the head nurse the same question. Any changes? And every evening, she'd give him the same answer. Not yet, Mr. Ross. 6 months in, William stopped asking. He'd just walk upstairs to the girls' room, sit on the floor beside their bed, and watch them sleep. They always curled together, Elizabeth's arm around Emily, like they were protecting each other from a world that had hurt them too much. I don't know what else to do, he whispered one night, his voice breaking in the darkness. I'm trying everything, baby girls. I promise I'm trying. But the silence never answered back. By month 8, the house felt like a tomb. Toys sat untouched in corners. The piano Catherine used to play gathered dust. The kitchen where she used to make breakfast every morning stayed cold and empty. William walked through rooms that used to be full of life and felt like he was drowning. One afternoon, his household manager knocked on his office door. Mr. Ross, I need to talk to you. William looked up from paperwork he'd been staring at for an hour without reading. The staff is overwhelmed, she said gently. Between the medical team, the therapists, the daily routines, we need more help. Just someone to handle the basic things. Cleaning, organizing, small tasks. William rubbed his face, exhausted beyond words. Fine. Hire someone. Are you sure? I can manage the interviews. Just find someone, he said quietly. I don't care who. She nodded and left. William turned back to the window, watching rain streak down the glass. He didn't know that the person about to walk through his door would change everything. Not through medicine, not through expertise, but through something far simpler. Something the doctors had forgotten existed. Rosemary James showed up on a Tuesday morning in late August. She stood on the front steps of the brownstone with a single duffel bag, wearing jeans and a jacket that had seen better days. Her shoes were worn at the heels. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her bag. The household manager opened the door and smiled warmly. You must be Rosemary. Come in. Rosemary stepped inside, her eyes scanning the grand entryway like she was trying to make herself smaller, like she'd learned a long time ago not to take up too much space. Thank you for the opportunity, she said softly. Her resume had been simple, a few housekeeping jobs over the past 3 years. Nothing fancy, nothing that raised questions. And that's exactly how Rosemary wanted it, because underneath those sparse lines was a story she'd spent years trying to bury. She used to be a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, the kind of nurse who remembered every kid's name, who sat on the floor to talk to them at eye level, who stayed late when a scared child needed someone to hold their hand. She loved that job, lived for it, until the night everything fell apart. A little boy came in with a severe infection. The attending physician ordered medication. Rosemary administered it exactly as prescribed. But the dosage was wrong, fatally wrong. The doctor had made an error, and the child didn't survive. Rosemary fought to save him, worked on him for hours, but it wasn't enough. The hospital needed someone to blame, and the doctor who made the mistake had powerful friends. The person who signed the report that destroyed her career was Dr. Marcus Pemberton, chief of pediatrics at the time, a man with enough influence to decide who survived professionally and who didn't. A few brutal lines in an incident report. License revoked, career over, reputation destroyed. Rosemary never fought it. She was too young, too broke, too broken to stand against someone like him, so she disappeared, took whatever work she could find, and tried to forget she'd ever been a nurse at all. Now, standing in William Ross's home, she had no idea that Marcus Pemberton was the one treating his daughters, that he was upstairs right now, running another evaluation. The household manager led her through the house, explaining the daily tasks. Rosemary nodded, listening, taking mental notes. Then they passed the living room. Rosemary stopped. Two little girls sat on the couch, identical twins, maybe 6 years old. They were holding each other, staring at nothing with eyes that looked hollow and far away. Rosemary's chest tightened. She'd seen that look before, too many times, in children who'd been through trauma so deep they couldn't find their way back. "Those are Mr. Ross's daughters," the manager said quietly. "They've been through a lot." Rosemary didn't respond. She just stood there, looking at Elizabeth and Emily, and whispered under her breath, "Oh, you poor little ones." She didn't know it yet, but in that moment, everything had already begun to change. Rosemary's third day started like the others. She cleaned quietly, moving through rooms like a shadow, trying not to disturb the medical staff that filled the house. Late afternoon, she found herself in the living room, picking up scattered papers and straightening cushions. The twins were on the couch, as always, silent, together. Rosemary worked around them, her mind drifting to memories she usually kept locked away. Without thinking, a melody slipped from her lips, soft, almost a whisper. "His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me." It was her grandmother's favorite hymn, the one she used to sing while cooking Sunday dinner, while folding laundry, while rocking Rosemary to sleep as a child. Rosemary didn't even realize she was singing until she noticed the silence had changed. She looked up. Elizabeth and Emily were staring at her. Not through her, at her. Their eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, were focused, present, seeing. Rosemary froze, the cloth still in her hand. "Oh," she whispered, "I'm sorry, sweethearts. I didn't mean to disturb you." But the girls didn't look away. They just kept watching her like they'd heard something they'd been waiting for. Rosemary's throat tightened. She gave them a small, gentle smile, then went back to cleaning. But her hands were shaking. William saw it from the hallway. He'd been walking to his office when he noticed Rosemary in the living room. He was about to keep going when he saw his daughters' faces. They were looking at her, really looking. His heart stopped. He stood there, barely breathing, afraid that any movement would shatter whatever was happening. Over the next few days, something shifted. The girls started following Rosemary with their eyes whenever she entered a room. They'd turn their heads slightly when she spoke. Once, Elizabeth reached out and touched the edge of Rosemary's sleeve as she walked past. Rosemary never made a big deal out of it. She just kept doing her work, humming softly, sometimes talking to herself in that gentle way of hers. "Okay, now where did I put that dustpan? Oh, there it is. My grandmother used to say I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached." And the girls would listen. Not with words, but with something deeper. William watched it all from doorways, from the top of the stairs, from the shadows. He saw Emily tilt her head when Rosemary laughed at her own joke. Saw Elizabeth's mouth twitch at the corner like she was trying to remember how to smile. Tiny changes, so small anyone else would miss them. But to William, they felt like watching the sun break through after 9 months of darkness. He wanted to hope, desperately, but he'd learned hope was dangerous. So he just watched, and waited, and prayed that whatever light Rosemary had brought into his house wouldn't fade away. 2 weeks later, William came home early from the office. He'd had meetings all day, but couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to the house, to the girls, to the small changes he'd been seeing. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside, and heard something that made his heart stop. Laughter, faint, fragile, but unmistakable. What? He dropped his briefcase, his pulse racing. The sound was coming from upstairs, from the girls' bedroom. William moved toward the stairs, each step careful, quiet, like he was afraid of scaring away something sacred. The laughter came again, soft giggles, and then voices, children's voices. His hands started shaking. He reached the bedroom door. It was cracked open. He pushed it gently and looked inside. Rosemary was lying on a cushion on the floor, one hand on her forehead, pretending to be sick. Elizabeth and Emily stood over her wearing little white coats, old Halloween costumes from years ago. Toy stethoscopes hung around their necks, and they were talking. "Miss Rosie, you need to take your medicine," Elizabeth said, her voice small but clear. Emily nodded seriously, holding out a plastic bottle. "It'll make you feel better." Rosemary smiled, playing along. "Oh, thank you, doctors. I feel better already." The girls giggled. William's knees buckled. He grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling, his vision blurring with tears. "They're speaking. My daughters are speaking." He covered his mouth with his hand, trying not to sob out loud. Rosemary looked up and saw him. Her eyes went wide. "Mr. Ross, don't apologize," he choked out, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't apologize." He couldn't say anything else. Just stood there, shaking, watching his daughters play like normal children for the first time in 9 months. That night, after the girls were asleep, William called Marcus. His hands were still trembling as he dialed. "Marcus," they spoke. Elizabeth and Emily spoke. "It's a miracle." There was a pause on the other end, long enough to feel wrong. "William, are you sure that's a positive sign?" William frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're talking. After 9 months. That's exactly why I'm concerned," Marcus interrupted, his voice measured, clinical. "You said they were with the housekeeper when this happened?" "Yes, Rosemary. She's been, and they call her Miss Rosie?" "Well, yes, but, William, this could indicate transfer psychosis." Marcus's tone shifted, colder now. "A distorted attachment to a caregiver. It can lead to serious psychological dependence, possibly dangerous." The joy in William's chest started turning to ice. "Dangerous? Marcus? She's been helping them, has she?" Marcus cut in. "William, what do you actually know about this woman? About her past? Why she's working as a maid?" William hesitated. I don't know. Exactly." A pause. "Let me look into her background, just to be safe, for the girl's sake." William's stomach twisted. "I'll call you tomorrow," Marcus said, and the line went dead. William sat in the dark, the phone still in his hand, and felt the miracle slipping through his fingers. Marcus called the next morning. William was in his office when the phone rang. He picked up on the first ring. "William, we need to talk about Rosemary James." His stomach dropped at the tone in Marcus's voice. "I had someone look into her background," Marcus continued. "She was a nurse at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. Lost her license 3 years ago after a child died under her care." William felt the room tilt. "What? A medication error? The child didn't survive. The hospital revoked her license. She's been hiding this from you, William. She's unsupervised with your traumatized daughters." William's hand tightened on the phone. "Are you sure?" "Completely. I can send you the documentation if you need it." William hung up and sat in silence. His daughters had spoken for the first time in 9 months because of Rosemary, but a child had died under her care. What if she's dangerous? What if I'm risking their lives? That evening, he called Rosemary into his office. She came in quietly, her hands folded in front of her. "Rosemary," William started, his voice heavy. "Is it true you used to be a nurse? In Philadelphia?" Her face went pale. "Yes. And a child died." Her eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Ross, I tried to save that little boy. The doctor made a mistake with the dosage. I did everything I could." "But you didn't tell me," William said, his voice rising. "You hid this from me." "Because no one would hire me if they knew," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I wasn't trying to deceive you. I needed to work, to survive." William looked away, his jaw tight. "I think you need to leave." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Rosemary nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just turned and walked to the door. William heard small footsteps on the stairs. Elizabeth and Emily were standing there, watching. Their faces crumpled when they saw Rosemary crying. "Miss Rosie!" Elizabeth's voice was so small. Rosemary gave them a broken smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're going to be okay." But the girls started crying. Silent tears, the same hollow, empty tears from 9 months ago. They reached for her, but William stepped between them. "Say goodbye." "Girls." Rosemary walked out the front door, and it closed behind her with a soft click. Elizabeth and Emily stood at the bottom of the stairs, tears streaming down their faces, not making a sound. By morning, they'd stopped talking again. They sat on the floor of their room, holding each other, staring at nothing. Exactly like before. William knelt in front of them, his hands shaking. "Please, sweethearts, please talk to Daddy." But they didn't even look at him, and he knew. He'd made the worst mistake of his life. 3 days passed. William tried to restart the old therapy schedule, but the girls were worse than before. They wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just sat by the window, waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. He couldn't breathe in his own house. One night, he went into his office and started going through the medical files Marcus's team had been sending for months. documents he'd never had the energy to read closely. He was looking for anything, any clue about what to do next. That's when he found it. A thick folder buried under expense reports, red binder clip, different from the others. The label read, Behavioral Evaluation, Boston Children's Hospital. William frowned. Marcus had never mentioned another hospital. He opened it. The first page had a logo he recognized, Boston Children's Hospital Pediatric Psychiatry Department, and a name, Dr. Sarah Chen, Clinical Director. His heart started pounding. He flipped the page. The diagnosis was right there at the top. Acute grief response with selective withdrawal. Prognosis, excellent with proper emotional support. Full recovery expected within 6 to 12 months. William stopped breathing. He read it again. And again. Excellent prognosis. Full recovery expected. The recommendations were clear. Avoid invasive interventions. Increase warm, consistent caregiver presence. Music therapy. Play-based connection. Patient time for natural grieving. Everything Rosemary had been doing. William's hands started shaking as he looked at the date. Month 2. 7 months ago. There was a note at the bottom. Report submitted to Dr. Marcus Pemberton per his request to coordinate family care plan, awaiting distribution. The folder slipped from William's hands. Marcus had this report. For 7 months, a report that said his daughters would recover naturally, and he buried it. Prescribed the opposite treatment, $50,000 a week. William grabbed his phone, found Dr. Chen's number on the letterhead, and dialed. She answered on the third ring. Dr. Chen, speaking. This is William Ross. His voice was shaking. Why didn't I ever receive your report about my daughters? There was a pause. Mr. Ross, I sent my evaluation directly to Dr. Pemberton. He was coordinating your daughter's care. He said he'd share it with you. William closed his eyes. I never saw it. I'm very sorry. My evaluation clearly stated your daughters would recover with basic supportive care. No experimental treatments were necessary. William's hand tightened around the phone. Thank you, doctor. He hung up and sat in the darkness. Marcus didn't just fail to help his daughters. He kept them sick, on purpose. And 3 years ago, he destroyed Rosemary's career to cover his own mistake. William stood up, his jaw set, his eyes hard. You're done, Marcus. He picked up the phone again. This time, he wasn't calling a doctor. He was calling his lawyers. William didn't sleep that night. He made calls. Forensic accountants, medical fraud investigators, attorneys who'd built careers taking down corrupt doctors. Bring me everything, he told them. Within 48 hours, they had it. Marcus hadn't just hidden one report. He'd been running a network of fraud for years, falsified diagnoses, unnecessary treatments, insurance schemes, patients who didn't need experimental therapies but got them anyway because Marcus got paid. And buried deepest in the files, Philadelphia, 3 years ago, a medication error that killed a child. The doctor who made the fatal mistake, Marcus Pemberton. The nurse who tried to save that little boy and reported the error, Rosemary James. Marcus had forged the incident report, destroyed her career to protect himself, then moved to Boston and built an empire on lies. William stared at the evidence spread across his desk and whispered, How many lives did you destroy? When federal investigators arrested Marcus at Mass General, the cameras were everywhere. He was led out in handcuffs, his face pale, his prestigious career crumbling in real time. Other victims came forward, one after another, families he'd exploited, careers he'd destroyed. The trial was brutal. The sentence, 15 years in federal prison, medical license revoked, $8 million in restitution. William didn't watch the verdict. He was already in the car, driving to Dorchester. He pulled up to a small apartment building and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Then he climbed the stairs and knocked on Rosemary's door. She opened it, her eyes red from crying. Mr. Ross, I was wrong, he said, his voice breaking. Rosemary, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have listened. Rosemary's hand covered her mouth. The medical board reinstated your license this morning, William continued. They cleared your name, completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But more than that, William said quietly, my daughters need you. I need you. Please, come home. Rosemary looked past him and saw Elizabeth and Emily in the car, their faces pressed against the window, eyes pleading. She nodded. unable to speak. The girls burst out of the car, running. "Miss Rosie, don't ever leave again." They wrapped around her, and Rosemary knelt down, holding them both, crying into their hair. William watched his family, broken and scattered, become whole. The brownstone filled with life again, piano music in the evenings, Rosemary's stories at bedtime, the girls' laughter echoing through halls that had been silent too long. 10 years later, at the Ross Foundation Gala, Elizabeth stood at the podium. "One person's kindness saved our lives," she said, her voice strong and clear. In the front row sat Rosemary James, MSN, clinical director of the Ross Foundation's Children's Trauma Center. William reached over and took her hand. "You gave me my family back," he whispered. Rosemary squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. "We built something beautiful from the broken pieces." The girls rushed down to embrace them both, and in that moment, every wound, every battle, every loss had led exactly here, to a family forged not by blood alone, but by grace, truth, and love that refused to break.